Good morning and welcome back to the Explicit Measures podcast with Tommy and Mike. Hello, everyone, and good morning.
Oh my gosh, we're back.
We are back yet again. Sorry for the slight delay today. Technical issues all over the place. Couldn't get into the app. Couldn't get my headphones working. Had to use a backup pair. So hopefully everything will run smoothly for the rest of the episode. We'll see what happens. Who knows?
Yeah. I'm going to blame the weather in the Midwest right now. So I don't know if you've heard of this before, but there's actually 6 seasons in the Midwest.
Mm-hmm.
And they're all around spring. Yeah. So there's winter.
Yep.
Then there's
winter. Winter.
There
a cold winter and summer.
The one we're in right now is called the Spring of Illusionment
Disillusionment?
Deception. The Spring of Deception.
Spring of Deception. I could see that.
I've never heard that before because it's 40.
It's warm, but it's not going to be warm for long.
Right. It's going to drop back down to -10. So that's what I'm going to blame any technological issues on. Wires just can't handle the changes.
Yes, true statement. That's funny. All right, well, jumping in, today's topic is a really good mailbag that came from our audience. So we really appreciate the questions or the comments that are coming from our audience. So thank you very much. Keep supplying us with great content. This is wonderful. We're really happy to talk about this one. It's all about the citizen developer. And I don't think we got a name on this one, but just kind of talk through things that they have done as a citizen developer, where they start, what kind of projects do they move into, and kind of how they've grown in their company. So we're going to unpack that a little bit. Maybe Tommy and I will share some of our journeys as well around how we have learned things, where there are challenge points, and other areas around that as well. But before we get into that, let's do some news. There is a new update from the Microsoft Fabric blog, which just came out, which is awesome. Let's dive into that one. I'll go grab the link here. I'll put that in the chat window for those who want to check out the most recent blog. But the Fabric blog was just posted. Anything that stood out to you, Tommy?
Yeah, there's a few I'm going to quickly touch on. One that I'm liking to see. I don't think it's a major feature, but I think it's really important where we're getting with AI. And there's a section now with Copilot when you're in reporting for Power BI, where it's actually going to show you how Copilot arrived at its answer or its response. This is really important to me because I think a lot of times when I want to say, hey, give me a summary, what was the order quantity last year? It shows you a number. And I think from a trust point of view, if we struggle with getting people to trust data, and that's a constant battle, a constant uphill battle, that's exponential with AI. And I think the fact that this is coming where, hey, it's going to show you, hey, we use the subcategory and we use the metric order quantity. And here's the filters we applied. Because if I don't know what that number is or I can't trust it, I'm not going to use Copilot ever. If I'm like, or worse, if I think it's right, I tell someone that number, they're like, that's not what our quantity was last year. I'll never go back to it. I don't care what features update. I'm never going to go back to it. So giving someone the context of here's the filters we applied, here's the metric that we used, and allowing people to have confidence here. I know it's not a major feature, but to me, I think this is very significant for the trust and the actual use of it.
This is interesting that you bring this up, Tommy. I'm just trying to unpack this a little bit around Copilot. So let me just give you some context. Like when you use a Copilot, there's been a couple Copilots I've used over the years, and it's been very, like, not Copilot per se, but like just general AI things in general. And there's always a moment of like, aha, or like, wow, that really impressed me. Like, I didn't think it was going to do that. And I had another one of those moments. I just have been playing with the new Grok AI, which is out there. They just released their Grok 3, I believe. It has this now voice thing that you can talk to it with voice, and it reads things back to you. It's almost like talking to someone as opposed to just, randomly chatting away to the chatbot. But in lieu of that, I was extremely impressed with, there's this feature that says think or thinking.
Oh, yeah.
Thought. And so you give it like a topic and say, think about this. And it has some like pre-prompted things. So which, again, the pre-prompt things that they give you, they're like, here's examples of what you could make it do. But, you sit there and watch it think through things. And it was very interesting on how it unpacked stuff. I basically told it to, so for example, I said, hey, let's let's try find a side job, a side gig, right? So I said, imagine I'm a person who lives in Wisconsin who needs to make X number of dollars per month. I want to find a side job or gig that I could do that would not include weekends, and just kind of like list out a couple like criteria.
Ooh, I like
I
that.
said, think about this. And it thought about the answer. And then what it did, it kind of walked through and said, well, okay, here's my reasoning for this. They mentioned, non-technical skills. So I wasn't going to push you into like a technology job. Here's some interesting jobs that seem lucrative in your area, but that didn't really fit what you were asking for initially. And kind of went through a whole bunch of things and then came up with an answer that I thought was like really reasonable. And it could see it like rationing its way through and said, here are some options. Here's a price range of what you could expect if you're going to do a side job or gig or something. I was very impressed with how well it was like, but that's the moment though. Like when you use something new like this, you have a very small window to impress somebody with what the AI can do. Because if the AI gives you just crap results, you'll try it once or twice and then you'll never touch it again. Like you're like, if it doesn't really wow you or bring that aha moment right away at the very beginning, I'm not going to touch it again.
Yeah. And I think that that's a really big point, because with any technology, and I think especially in the space we're in now, there's a difference between the random browsing and finding something interesting, or putting your money where your mouth is, so to speak, where you're actually going to then actually apply that and trust that technology, so to speak, to use it. Just like with this Copilot feature where, okay, I found the number, but am I going to email someone that number, say our number's this? And am I going to trust that that's right? Because I don't want to come back and goes, actually, that number is completely off. Where'd you get that from? Because now that looks bad on me. And I'm not going to blame Copilot. That's, that's my my chair on my chair on the line. Right.
Yeah, exactly right.
So
yeah, I also saw something recently show up. I mean, Copilot is just riddled all over Fabric and Power BI at this point. And again, I'll just keep saying it again. I don't know who's listening to this podcast. Microsoft, if you're even listening, I don't even know anymore. Like, I really don't like the fact that Copilot is only available at F64. You put it everywhere in the product and people want to use it. I'm even actually having customers now asking me, like, how could we use Copilot? What's the threshold? What's the barrier to get into it? And I said, it's an F64. And they're like, oh, that's out. We can't use it. We're not going to put it in places. Yeah. But I mean, it's incredibly powerful. And I'm now actively seeking ways to use other Copilots that are free or ones that I could actually pay for that are not linked to Fabric anymore. Like, I'm actively seeking, how can I pull all of my notebooks out to my VS Code and use the GitHub Copilot that I already pay for? Like, why can't, me as a user, why not give me the option to get into Fabric and sign in with GitHub Copilot and then let me use that everywhere I want to use it?
Everywhere. Yeah. And I can be as heavy and intensive if I want to with that too, which is crazy. There's no limit.
I know.
And Microsoft, I'm going to second this.
Yes. I mean, it's super helpful for me. You own them, Microsoft, and I can't use them in the product. So I'm actively trying to get my stuff out of Fabric a little bit to some degree, especially when I'm doing very heavy code, because it's just so helpful to me to have that your programmer with you to work through things. I need a function that does this. No, I don't like that. Reformat it. Just a lot of extra help there. The reason I bring this up is I also saw this show up in a SQL Data Warehouse. SQL Data Warehouse was asking Copilot, you could talk to Copilot in line with the SQL engine and ask it to like build this table, group by this. Like, you could just tell it to write the code for you. And it had a little message at the top that said, hey, just FYI, Copilots, are not always right all the time. You still need to check your code. Don't trust all the time. Like, I understand. I mean, I think that's going to be a disclaimer they're going to have to put on top of everything. But at the end of the day, I was like, I can't use this feature. It's not useful to me if I don't get it all the way down to the F2 level.
Yeah.
So anyways.
It's the same like the egg pandemic or epidemic that we have. Guess what? I'm eating bacon. Like,
right?
Like, if eggs are going to be $12, I'm eating Cheerios. Like, so
I'm going to move to something else.
And I want to use it, man. I want to apply it to every client, but it's not even an option or a consideration at this point. But I agree. But I still think it's great what they're doing with the product. I think we'll eventually get there where it's going to be accessible to more people. Just to make it an add-on for I'm not gonna rant on that. But
I don't know. It's just not cool the way it is right now. I don't. You're pushing it so hard, yet it's so limited to what people can access. It really feels like you're trying to just get people to pay more for Copilot to get you up to the F64 level.
Hot take.
Hot take, I guess. It is what it is. I mean, if I'm Microsoft, that's what I'm doing, right? Here's a really cool feature. Look, you need to get to F64 to use it. But I just don't like the fact that it's, let me decide as the user how much to throttle this by. And, they could put controls in there, right? Limit Copilot by user all the way down
How
to
many
that
prompts you get a month or something? I don't
something
know.
like
Yeah.
that. It's got to be in there somewhere, and that way I can reasonably use it because it's not like I'm using Copilot all the time. Anyways, I'm using it in like bursts, right? I'm in this notebook, I'm doing this work, I'm trying to figure something out. That's when I need a little bit of assistance. And so now what I find myself doing is literally copying the code out, moving it to a different notebook, using a different Copilot on it, get the answers that I want, and then bring the code back. Just
That's
a whole bunch of
exactly
extra
it.
steps that are just not useful.
Yeah. So that's mine feature kind of thing. So Mike, do you have anything that stands out for you from the blog?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always happy. I mean, this is a very minor thing, but I'm always happy when they start saying full CI/CD support for T-SQL notebooks and GitHub's deployments and pipelines. Anytime they start doing any of this Git stuff, I mean, the deployment pipelines aren't perfect, but it does a lot of work for me when I need to move things between environments. I'm more and more becoming a fan of using CI/CD patterns, more and more around Git and integration with Git. I just think it's very relevant for me. So that's one I really enjoy. Some things that have been helpful for me, again, I spent a lot of time in notebooks in general. So there's been a little bit more around notebook snapshots enhancements.
Oh yeah.
So that's another one. When you run a notebook and the notebook fails or doesn't run correctly, or the cell fails in the notebook, it's very difficult for me to go back and retroactively debug, like, what happened? What was the problem? Was there a data issue in one of the cells of the notebook? And what was the error message that came out from that? So now what we're able to see is we're seeing better snapshotting of the notebooks. And let me just read the note here real quick. Snapshots Tree Explorer now gives you a hierarchical view, making it easier to understand the parent-child relationships and track parent notebooks and triggered child notebooks through the utilities. They're also having snapshots for running notebooks. Users can now access snapshots in runs of a pipeline or the direct schedule when they are still in progress. So this is also something that I think is incredibly important. When the notebook is running, or when it's doing its job, if you hit run or a scheduled job is running, I want to drop into the notebook and watch the notebook do its work, like right there. That's very common. A lot of other Spark tools do this already. Yeah. So to have that availability to me is great. My only gripe still with the reporting or analytics or metrics around the notebook experience, there's still a bit of in my opinion, it's a weakness around, I need to know the network traffic, the compute consumption, and the memory consumption. This is something that's probably just very specific to me at this point because, here's what let me tell you why.
No, I agree. I think it's more common than you think.
I think people need to see this because if I'm on a small cluster, fine, but I need to understand what's going on at the cluster level. Like, am I compute constrained? Am I memory constrained? But the options here, when you go into Fabric, you don't really get any other option than only thing you can use is a memory optimized virtual machine. Right. I don't get a compute optimized virtual machine. If I go over to Databricks, I have the ability to do like a memory optimized, a compute optimized. I can do, with there's like some caching they have on there, some extra, bits there that are around caching things. You can even get a graphics processor unit. So if you need a GPU enabled cluster, you can get that too. So I understand that Microsoft's trying to simplify the experience, but I feel like I get more options other places. And so if I'm really tuning my notebook to run correctly through my jobs, I really do need to understand, like, am I using a pure Python notebook on a single node cluster? Maybe I should be using a Spark notebook. Maybe the T-SQL is more efficient. I don't know. I think they're literally switching different compute engines behind the scenes for these different processes. Does that make sense?
No, it was funny you say that because they kind of give you the all or nothing approach. I don't remember exactly how to get there, but in a given notebook run, you can actually go to the Spark portal. And it's a whole different website. Have you done this before?
Yeah, that's the Ganglia UI, I believe.
But again, the Ganglia UI.
Then, they don't even have all of it. Like they don't have the entire. Like, so if I go to other Spark instances, again, I'm running Databricks. I'll be clear. I'm not going to be bashful. About I run Databricks. I go to Ganglia. I have a very clear view. Here's all the clusters, all the machines running. Right. I can see the nodes turn on. I can see the memory ramp up when they go bigger, or the machine scales up.
Right.
That's what I want to see. I mean, that's what I use to be as like my barometer of, hey, is this cluster? Yeah, is this cluster running well? And they give me some level of that, but it's not all the way there. So I'm happy to see any kind of improvements around visibility, what's going on in the Spark engine. I've been getting a lot of feedback from other people saying, The fabric experience is just so much in there. There's so many things to kind of know how to
Yep.
do. It's very rare to find someone who's built solutions in all the areas inside fabric. And I would agree. I mean, you're either kind of like the Power BI expert, you know what's going on there. You need to have experts in notebooks and data engineering. And now you're going to have experts in like real-time event
Yeah.
hubs, all this other stuff that's in there as well. So there's a lot of things to get your head around, which is
Yeah.
nice. It is the Swiss Army of data right now. But is it really easy for people to get started? No, I don't think so. People are just going to need more time to get used to it.
Yeah, and I love it. I see where they're trying to go with a lot of those. And to your point, there's some incremental updates here or features that you're like, we're getting there. We're getting there.
Yes.
One, I think we should, the last one I just want to touch on, because I think it's personally, I think it's you and I's favorite feature right now. And it's the One Lake catalog. They are doing some awesome things here. And I got to give some love here, man, because
I agree with that one.
I am really enjoying the experience and using it in a very actionable way in my daily routine. So the update they have is govern your individual data estate in One Lake catalog. And
Yeah,
oh man, we are getting somewhere stupendous here.
this is the thing that Purview promised but never delivered on.
Yeah.
And now
So-
we're getting a better view of it inside Power BI only or Fabric only. This is really what we want.
Yeah. I just had a conversation with a client and they were asking about Purview.
Mhm.
And I literally said, hey, if you're looking to get Microsoft, or if you're going to be in a Fabric space, you should look into the One Lake catalog and what they're doing there. If you're going to jump into Fabric, that's going to give you a lot of what you need.
Yeah, there's another option here, right? The feature right above the one you're discussing is permissions tab in the One Lake catalog.
Yes. Yeah.
They're adding a lot of things here that are like, hey. So again, my opinion here is, if you have things that are in the One Lake catalog, right? It's this place to be discoverable. Like, what things are out there and which things do I have access to? And I think it should really be the authority of the owner of that item, right? So if Tommy, you make a lake house, you put some stuff in there. Tommy, you should be able to say, is this lake house discoverable to non-users of the lake house? Do you want other people to see it? That should be an option that you allow. And what that does is it puts it in One Lake. You can see that the item exists. You could maybe even, again, to your point, Tommy, or my point to you would be like, maybe Tommy would want to say, look, you can see even the column names. You can even see a description of every column. Like, you can see some information about that lake house. What types of information would you allow people to discover? And then when they see it, if they think they need access to it, they could actually request access.
Yeah.
So, hey, the owner of this data set is Tommy, submit a request. And then Tommy will get a little message. Hey, Mike shows up. He found your really cool baseball data set. He wants to go look at it. He wants to make sure the Yankees are still losing this year. So,
hasn't started.
Whatever, whenever they start, I don't know, in the spring, I guess, sometime.
It already hurts.
It already hurts. But that way I can look at the data sets that you're publishing. And the idea here is this starts to break down data silos. We need to be able to have an easy way for people to go in and discover where data exists and see what's being built off of it. If you already have access to reports that are using this lakehouse, I should be able to go see the report and see the lineage of it. And I potentially could ask for other things upstream to use those items.
Mike, I'll do you one better, even for the individual developer. I've been using the One Lake catalog because I want to do some spring cleaning. I hate and I love the fact that if I say create a notebook, it saves it automatically. Notebook 1, notebook 2, notebook 3.
Yeah, that's true.
And I wanted to go through all the notebooks I've created because I'm like, I know I'm only using so many.
Yeah.
And there's a lot that I don't need. So rather than going to every workspace and filtering, I have that ability in the One Lake catalog to go through and say, where are all the notebooks in what workspaces? I can filter based on where I've had it in a task flow. I have all these features available, and I've been actually doing my organization through the One Lake catalog, and it's been incredible. So it really has a potential for both, I think, organizations, but also the individual developer.
Yeah, agree. All right, I want to jump on. I think that's enough for the preview. So definitely read through the features here. I will argue there's probably more features that are being hidden. I mean, this is actually, okay, we're at the end of February. This was the work done in February. This is a pretty good rollout of features and things, even though we're coming up to Fabric Conference here in March. typically what happens, what I find is Microsoft holds back a lot of announcements for like the Fabric conferences that are coming out. So I really anticipate a lot of really big announcements in Fabric conference, which I'm very excited about. I'll be in Las Vegas this year. If you want a discount code, FYI, there's one in the description of this video, and I will throw it down here in the chat window just in case.
Yeah.
If you want to get $200 off your ticket, you can. The discount code is in the chat in case you'd like to use it.
Yeah, usually February is, we've changed an icon in Power Query for the transform for use first row as headers. The icon has a different color. That's the February update.
Yeah, exactly. So, but I mean, my point is they're actually giving some really good features out here in February. In addition to, there's probably more coming out here in March as well that they're going to announce and let you know about as well. This is exciting. There's just so much going on. Anyways, I have to imagine the Power BI and Fabric team now is maybe not the Power BI team, but more so the collective data team between Fabric and Power BI is now probably massive. I mean, imagine all the people, each one of these has a different team. The Fabric platform, the One Lake team, the data engineering team, the data science team, data warehousing team, real-time intelligence team, database team, and now data factory team. Like all these teams, there's a whole bunch of, this is a huge team now. So very excited, very happy to see that one. Very, happy to have all the big updates. All right. Anyways, anything else you wanted to cover on the blog? Maybe we jump into the actual topic now.
Let's dive in.
Okay. So our main topic. I do see the name here. It's Jake. Tommy, you want to give us a read through on our topic for today?
Hi guys, I'm Jake, and I am in purchasing at my company. I am a citizen developer, but also a citizen report builder, citizen data modeler, and citizen data engineer. I love that already.
Mm-hmm.
So I agree with Mike 100%.
Great. We're done here. This is it. Thank you for the episode.
Just over 400 episodes. I agree with Mike.
400. We're done. This is it. We've reached I've reached the top. This is it.
That's the same as go. How do you feel with Mike on his views on notebooks and Python? Yes.
We're done here. Sorry, I didn't mean to go back to the question.
No, we're good. It is quality. My company doesn't have a great data culture. I start building tools and the reports for myself and my team for what local data I could access. After success with that, I built reports for other teams. After that, I was given access to the data warehouse and built a semantic model that could be used throughout the company. So there's a question. There's not so much a direct question here, but I want to focus this main topic on, he's a citizen developer, but he calls himself also the report builder, citizen data modeler, which is what the organization has called him, not what it really he's doing. He's probably actually a developer.
Yes.
But his company also has a low data culture. And oh my gosh, how much is this such a common problem? So let's dive in, Mike. What's your first thought here?
Well, you described my journey directly, honestly. Like this was my journey with Power BI. I was in a department. I was working on just Power BI desktop in a very small fashion, just building a couple little simple reports. Actually, I started noodling around a lot more with like Power Query inside Excel. That's actually where I really started my journey. And then Power BI Designer came out way back in 2015. I was like, ooh, this is interesting. This is not BI online or BI in SharePoint, which is what I think kind of originally things started out as. It's this online interactive thing. And the Power Query portion caught my eye as far as the data engineering, because I was in mechanical engineering at the time. I did a lot of data analysis off of machines that would generate data. So I was constantly building like statistical analysis. I was constantly pulling data off of machines and analyzing it. Like, are we in tolerance? Are we not? What are our tests doing? So I was constantly dealing with like lots of flat files that were given to me and manipulating the data. And I did what every other great Excel developer does. You build your template Excel file where you copy your data into, and you literally go to open up your data, copy, paste it, and then all of your formulas just kind of like light up and work, and you get your analysis done. So, that was the efficient way to do it because you didn't have any other better tools. So for me, I started out as the citizen report builder, the citizen Power Query builder inside Excel. And then I moved into, okay, well, now I got to start learning how to do data modeling because I started using these like visuals, and I was making like interactive visuals between two things. That was really intriguing. I got my mind like lit on fire with like all the things you could do there. And then I really went deep on building reports and what that meant. And in doing that, when you get better at building reports, you instinctively have to get better at being a better data modeler. Then my DAX got hard. Then it got really complex. I'm like, what's wrong with me? Then you realize, oh, the shape of your data is all wrong. You actually need to shape your data differently. And then you start learning about like facts and dimensions and then real star schemas. Oh, look at this. There's this Kimball methodology. I should probably learn about that. So it kind of turns into this snowball of like things you learn. And all of a sudden, boom, now I'm taking my master's in data science. I'm all in Spark. I'm doing the data engineering route, trying to figure out where AI, ML lives inside the business. And here I am many years later, and I'm running this for other companies and other people.
Right.
That was my progression. That was how I started in a simple, easy to use UI way, and it kept growing. And the nice part was I felt like for me it was whatever rock I was standing on, there was another challenge or rock or something just far enough away I could reach my toe out and make a step towards the next thing to learn. And I could just keep making the next thing to learn and the next thing to learn. And then when you look back, you've made this really long trail of all these really rich things you've learned over the time. I didn't plan it out. I wasn't like, oh, I'm going to be a consultant and I'm going to own my own company. I'm going to build software. I mean, it was maybe a dream of mine to maybe do some of that, but it wasn't my main objective or goal with the data stuff.
No. And we have some overlap in our own journeys. When I was a young boy, but the overlap is definitely on some of that journey. But the only difference for me was when I started out, I was hired to be in business intelligence, to do reporting, but it was more for a team and it wasn't considered a developer at all.
Yeah.
Power BI came out, and at the same time, my organization was asking, we need a better tool for reporting.
Mm-hmm.
Tommy, can you dive in, take a look at this? And Power BI was the one that I really focused on.
Yeah.
And we immediately started building models and we immediately started building reports, but it was different because the way I was perceived at the organization was I was still like marketing more business. The people who were developers were only those who were working. You had to have SSMS or SSAS and SSIS installed on your machine.
Yeah.
Everyone else was not data, even though I was doing, even though I was doing all the data things. If I wasn't,
you're using the terms, but not everyone is coming from that realm. SSMS, SQL Server Management Studio.
SQL Management Studio, SQL Servers Integration Studio, SQL Servers Analysis Services. So, right. I believe, yes, I still got it. But the idea here is I was treated as the business guy, even though I was already knee deep in. By the time a year later, I was still knee deep in DAX, building models the right way, or working on the best practices there by this time.
Mm-hmm.
But it was still not considered part of business at the time. Organization change wasn't part of business intelligence, even though I was doing business intelligence things. Power BI still, even though all the stuff that was going behind the scenes, well, you're chart building, you're the visual report building,
correct,
and as things continue to expand and mature, data flows came out and all these things. It took a long time for the organization to realize that you needed dedicated people in Power BI because I was still pulled in other directions.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny you say all the things you did because this is still occurring. One of the pleasures that I have now is I get to train a lot and I do a lot of training and I always poll the attendees. What department are you in while you're here?
Sure.
And it's amazing how many, and I am positive you hear the same thing I do. It's eclectic. It's from every department.
Sure.
And one of the big things is no one there is directly in the business intelligence space. They are that pseudo hybrid to the citizen point of view, because a lot of times the organization, I don't want to say they don't have a high culture, but they don't know what they need. Like they don't know what it looks like. They don't know what Power BI is supposed to look like from a hierarchy and organizational point of view. And I don't want to say it's a problem. I'm not going straight negative, but it's a miss, I think, for a lot of organizations.
I want to unpack what you just said there because I think your observation of and maybe this is also it is the people who are asking for training. So I mean it is a very specific group of users, right? If you already understand how to model and data and SSMS, you're probably not going to go ask Tommy, hey, how do I use Power BI, right? You're just going to go figure it out and know how to do it, right? On the other hand, though, when you look at this one, I think this really affirms your experience and mine as well. A lot of people we've heard about Power BI. We do things in Excel. We have other things, maybe like Smart Sheets or something else. We're looking at we know there's a better way to do data. We've heard that it potentially could be Power BI. Let's learn about it and see if that actually would fit our needs. And then, to me, I'm looking at this going, this is a business user. This is a person who's in the business that says, I have desktop, I can get it for free. How can I use that to get my reporting needs met? As opposed to the business going to IT and saying, hey, I need this data in this way for me to be able to use it. So I think there's this, when Seth and I would go out and sell Power BI to different organizations, we always pitched it in the idea of that this is the first tool where pure IT, SSMS people, SQL Server Analysis Services, right? SSAS, those individuals, the very technical people and the business people could come to the same product, which is Power BI, and both could find very great benefits from using that tool. Business could go build reports. Business can go build simple models. They may not be performant yet, but at least it explains where did the data come from? How did I transform it? What works in my reporting? So this whole idea or concept of like building a proof of concept or prototype around a report, does it find value? Then handing it over to someone to make sure that it's sustainable, add more data, and can be managed by a bigger team. I think that works. I think you need a lot of experimentation on the data to figure out what parts of reports are working well for your organization.
And I think it can't go understated here. What you said is a very foreign concept for a lot of organizations. The fact that Power BI can be both for both people. One thing that I've found
I
through
agree.
my own journey is the golden rule. Whoever has the gold own the rules. Well, whatever the tools that you own, those people kind of own the flow of the data. I had a training with a team of Snowflake, and they were very resistant to doing anything modeling wise in Power BI.
Because they want to model it. Because again, that team in Snowflake controlled everything, all the permissions, all the tables, all the design, even though they don't understand the shape of the tables that need to be there for the Power BI report.
Right.
I have never been on a project where anyone has had a data warehouse, like a true SQL server, where the data was in perfect form and ready to be used in Power BI, because the visuals need the data to be shaped a certain way to get it to work correctly. And you need different levels of aggregation. The granularity is different. You may need to make that the same, or you may need to take things that were detailed in version and roll them up to higher level. Like all these things considered, unless you're actually in there building reports, you don't know exactly the shape of the data you're going to need until you get down to this page needs to look like this with these visuals on it.
And so let me tell you what happens to Jake in this situation, because I bet you it's very similar.
Mm-hmm.
Jake is asked to do a ton of things without the resources needed, where it's like, hey, we need you to build these data, but no one's going to give him access. Or at least from, like, let's say there's a Snowflake team or data engineering team. Like,
Well, not anymore. I mean, probably in the initial stages, that was the point.
A low data culture, and that's one of the things Jake said. So that's
yes, but at the end he says, after that, I've been given access to the data warehouse, and now I build semantic models through that for that company. So this is an area of trust, right? So this what I just see here also is describing his career of trust, right? You built some reports on your own, it worked for you. You started building semantic models for your team, it worked for you. Now you're building entire semantic models for the entire organization. To me, this is a common path I see when I engage with customers, when I work with them.
Oh yeah.
Typically the people I engage with, as they learn more, as they self-educate across a space, they get more and more responsibility. They become a bigger and bigger player in the organization, and more other teams realize they can leverage this experience of this individual to build better stuff.
But I'll still argue, though, the amount of work Jake has to do just to get the access to the local warehouses, he's already got to sell all of those local data, even just to get access to say, hey, this works. This works. And he's doing I bet you the data flows, the integration to actually show that this is a successful product and this is a successful workflow. The amount of up work to just get to the point of, can I get access? That is always the struggle, though, because I want to ask you, what does that tell you about a lot of people's struggles, where the amount of, hey, let me show you all these proof of concepts, or I have to go from the ground up? why is that a struggle for a lot of organizations, that bottom up approach, so to speak?
Well, I mean, I think it's traditionally there are arguments that I think that are used to keep people out of the data spaces, right? So one of the arguments is it's not secure. We don't have a way of controlling it, right? So I mean, I really believe that's a moot point when you talk about Fabric, because Entra ID is across everything. You can't
Sure.
access things you're not supposed to have access to, right? And a lot of I think this comes out of the security portion of this one is people don't understand their security models, nor do they understand the actual controls that are given to Power BI and Fabric
Mhm.
around who has access to what things. Another thing that hasn't been done very well by Microsoft, I think, is the visibility of what's going on, right? So I think
Right.
OneLake catalog with seeing there are data sets and who has access to those data sets, I think is very relevant, honestly, right? You should be able to have a single selection or somewhere in the tool that says we know exactly who has permissions to all the data sets. And if you're an admin of that data set or owner or whatever, you should be able to immediately remove access to all things, right? There's an API in the Fabric or Power BI. I'm not sure what it is. It's called overly shared assets.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
yeah,
there,
yeah, yeah.
so there's so much.
From the scanner API.
Yeah, there's so little visibility to like what has been shared to what people across your organization
Mhm.
that they made a dedicated API that said if anything has been shared to the entire organization that has it's shared to everyone. Here's
Mhm.
a single API to give you the details of all the things that are shared to everyone. The reason I say this comment is because without someone watching this to some degree, Tommy, you could make a report,
Mhm.
you could build an app, and you could share that app to the entire organization. That app and what's in that data, if you're sharing to the total organization, is there sensitive data in there? Has someone else reviewed it or looked at it or had a
Sure.
second set of eyes? There's no control like that. There's not that visibility that's immediately alerting people about what's going on. So this is a need that I think customers asked Microsoft, hey, look, we need to know what's being shared to the entire organization. Someone needs to be tracking this. We at minimum need at least an API that we can go hit, that we can go access what that is doing.
Yeah. I'm going to make an argument here. I think a lot of things you're saying are Power BI issues. They're not Fabric issues to me. And the reason why is you have to have a Fabric capacity to do much of the things. A lot of organizations either give the pro out, which then you can share pro with other pros, which you lead into
Sure.
these problems. The Power BI methodology or structure from a financial license point of view allows the bottom up approach to work because I can download desktop and I can start building. I can
Yes.
share my own workspace and I can still share again because usually at this point, low data culture, IT already hasn't set all the restrictions down. Fabric kind of by design, and it makes sense. By design, though, again, it's much more restrictive because you have to have a Fabric workspace to play in. I can't download Fabric and start building something without someone knowing and show how cool it is. Like
Well,
I have to be given
yeah,
direct access.
well, this is, I mean, yes, I agree with you, but I think the reason why that exists is because you're talking about a Power BI desktop application, right?
Right, right,
It's much harder to restrict access to something when it's a desktop application, and especially when you're giving the desktop application away for free, right? What's to
right.
say? Like I've seen people in organizations say they build a Power BI report and they email
Oh
or
yeah,
put on a share drive the Power BI report, give it to somebody else so they can open it up in their version of desktop. Like
still happens.
still
Yeah,
happens. I'm not saying it's gonna be, but my point though is Fabric is so big that you can't fit it on a single machine. That's the point of Fabric. So Fabric has to be a cloud service that you
yes.
use, and
Not arguing that.
and I think that's really, to me, that's like the break point of like why you're not seeing like, that's why desktop and Power BI is harder to control because it's easier for people to get it on their own machines. And so, in order
Right.
to restrict that, you need to have like security controls like Intune on your machine that says you can't install it. You need other security controls like you're not admin on the machine. And that happens in organizations. I get that. That's out there. But most organizations give you laptops and you have the ability to install software. You have the ability to go get things from the Microsoft Store.
Right.
In doing that, that makes your team more productive, but now you're not restricted to the PowerBI.com
Yeah.
experience where you really carve people out and cut people out of like,
Yeah.
hey, you just can't use this stuff.
If I'm a little hot right now about this topic, I think it's because I realized into this. I really do have an issue with Jake's comment that he's the citizen developer, citizen report builder, citizen data modeler, citizen data engineer, and he's in purchasing at the company, because I can feel for him. And this, what happens all too often is these type of people are asked to do so much and usually not getting compensated for it. And this is just what I found through conversations. This was my own story where you're this role, this is your title, this is why you got hired. But now all of a sudden, we realize you have this set of skills, and not realizing until way too late or past the due that
Hmm.
this person should be compensated or in a different role. And this is it. This fires me up. This is something that just fires me up.
I see. Yes, I get what I get what you're doing there. Um, hmm. Let, here, let me give you some thoughts on this one.
Okay.
So I think there's something. So there's an opportunity here, right? So one, it's this is more data culture and more company culture as well, right? I have seen instances where individuals were in the business. So this right now, you're in purchasing, you're doing these things, and you're building. You're getting access to data that is being supplied by IT, but then you're supporting it with modeling and reporting that you're distributing to a wider audience. I mean, you really are playing that role as part of the center of excellence. At some point in time, you need to drop the term citizen,
Yes.
because
Preach.
you are doing the thing, right? So, I mean, at this point, I would also argue if you've got this much time under your belt and you're now building reports that are being consumed by a larger audience, I think I would just stop. I would just start dropping the name citizen, and you are the report builder, you are the data modeler, and you are the call it lightweight data engineering. You're doing it. You're already
Yeah.
doing those roles, and you're providing value with it. So much so that people are now used to you being part of that solution. Where I hesitate here a little bit is the new role comment that you made, because I've seen people
Mm.
go from the business side where they were given leeway. They were able to just kind of ask data of questions of the IT group. Hey, give me access to the server. Great. Here you go. You'll build models on it. No problem. You own that, right? From the business perspective. But as soon as that person moves into the IT organization, you turn into a ticketing person. You turn into a culture that is not healthy in the data team, in the IT team, which really is like, we don't give access to anyone. You are now focusing
Yeah.
on all these random issues from tickets from other people. And what I find is sometimes moving roles out of the business and into the IT space is detrimental to your career. And what I find sometimes, and this doesn't happen all the time,
Mhm.
people, the IT group squelches that person and turns them into someone that they're not happy about. And then what winds up happening is they either leave the company and go find another company that allows them to, build creatively, make models, do reporting, or that business
Yeah.
person leaves the IT organization and goes back to the business. And so what happens now is that business says, look, we're actually ready to be innovative and push our team to build these great models, even though we know like our team is going to serve data to the broader part of the organization. That's totally acceptable. So they're not building shadow IT per se, but they're operating in their own department in a way that is useful to that employee. So Mike, to summarize here, I would really hesitate to say, look, you're doing all these things, stay with where you're at. If you like your boss, if you like what you're doing in this role, in this position, and you've been given access to the data warehouse, great, keep doing that. I would even argue, think about what you could do working with your manager to formalize some of these terms, right? You're calling yourself citizen developer, you're calling yourself citizen report builder. Go ask your boss, say, hey, I'm going to study up. I want to take some Microsoft certified exams. Put some exams on your list. Get those on your plate. Ask for dedicated training to go to a conference or go online and learn something specific. Go get SQL BI training, right? Get a certification from them. I mean, go to the experts who know what they're doing and then add that to your resume. Hey, I've gone through
And
these classes through SQL BI, found them really useful. And now you've got all this great, rich knowledge around like what they're doing.
nothing about that I really can argue, because when we say role here, I think that's a really important distinction, because that is the other side of the coin, my friend. That is the other extreme. what you said at the very end is, I think, the golden really avenue. That's the golden brick road or the red brick road to go down. Let's
It's the golden road.
okay. Let's formalize what I'm doing here, and I think that's
Yes.
the biggest thing, because too
Yes.
often people in these roles, they are tasked with their still daily things that they're getting paid for technically, and they're asked to do all these other things because this is so great, it's awesome. So they are pulled in a lot of directions, and they're working more hours on things that they're not, in a sense, getting rewarded for, or what they're valued for, because everyone's getting paid for something, right? And it's usually on your resume, or and it's usually on your job description. So if I'm going to be this role for purchasing, can we formalize this? Which usually means you have to relieve some of those other responsibilities, because I'm already doing all these other things, if that's the way we want to go. Because there's burnout. I cannot tell you from my own journey and how many other people from user groups that I've talked to that have experienced that same burnout, because they took up Power BI. It was an organic thing that happened. And that citizen developer is always just kind of leaned with them, like, well, you do all these things and Power BI,
Mm.
where that's more when they tell me, like, but that's what I do more. That's the majority of my day is working in Power BI, even though that's considered by the team the side gig, so to speak, like on a top, like just like if I worked in Excel, when we know that's not the case. So for a lot of these people, a lot of these roles, let's formalize it. And I agree with you. I want to make it clear too. The idea of, okay, I need to go on the BI team, I'm moving departments, that's hard. Like that the success of there usually is pretty tough. But can we at least relieve things and have that conversation? So this can be my dedicated role, which is not just a compensation thing. It's also me working closely with those data engineers so I can get the access quicker. I can get that permissions that I need to be successful.
Yeah, I mean, I think at some level, I mean, when I was in some departments very early on in this data BI space of things, right? It was very helpful for um, the business to pay for a salary. And this is a weird way of thinking about this one, but it's nice to have the business pay for the salary of a headcount in IT, where the person reports to IT, but is being paid for by the business. So the idea here is, when you have commitment like that from two different teams, right? The headcount means the IT person is then, has access to all the things that IT does because they're reporting up through IT. All the security pieces are there. On the other hand, since the business is paying for that headcount person, having that direct link, I mean, inherently, right? The business always pays for IT to show up, right? That's if the business didn't sell the products, there would be no IT to support the products that they're selling, right? That's kind of how it goes. But like, there's not this direct financial tie. And so sometimes the missions or objectives of IT don't necessarily align with what the business wants to do. The priorities of the business aren't always the same level of effort that the IT organization, right? IT may be focused on, hey, we're doing these really big things like building a new CRM, migrating data platforms, like really big things that they need people for. But the business kind of sits on the side saying, well, now what about us? Where do we get help from? We can't, to your point, Tommy, we can't get access to that database or data warehouse where we need to build, shape, model data and get it into our reports so we can actually make, decisions on that data. So I really find what worked well for our team was the IT individual was hired on, the business literally paid for that position, but the portion reported directly into IT. And so there was a little bit of headbutting every so often, but when it came down to brass tacks, when the individual in IT needed to get pulled off to do some other random IT based project, and there's an initiative, the business can say, stop, you have your other people for that. We need this person to build this or fix this or modify that in our existing thing. And that there was enough authority there because like we pay their salary. If we don't pay that, that person disappears. So this is very interesting to me. And I don't know how do you handle it very well. I think it's a leadership issue. It's a culture issue, what you're stepping into here. And there's only two ways you solve that. You either just deal with the culture that is there and you try to influence the culture as much as you possibly can by giving good reports, good models, good center of excellence, right? You can lead by example, but it's a very uphill path. And sometimes leadership is just resistant. The second option is you leave. You go find another company that has the data culture in place that you want to, like, they're innovative, they're thinking well, they're giving you the time to do that. And again, for better or for worse, Tommy, to your point, people get overwhelmed. If you don't move or switch between roles or jobs, it's hard to offload those other tasks onto other people. You don't really ever leave your last job unless you're physically moving to another job. Or in my career, I was in a very large organization and I moved between business units. And that was great because all the responsibility of that last business unit, I was able to have a time period, have a full handoff in a period of time, and I left it. I was able to say, I'm done now. I'm moving on to the new thing. Yeah, they would maybe ask me some questions later on, but like I was pretty much, out of that department and doing a new thing. And so when I had those very large movements between departments, I was able to remove the old responsibilities and focus on the new responsibilities that I was very excited about. And the reason I left my company was because I was tired. I was getting pushed into a management role and not a Power BI developer, builder, modeler role. And I felt like my career could go either way. I could do well in both areas, but I didn't want to spend more time if it wasn't in Power BI. And I said, I'm going to double down and just do Power BI full time. I remember having a conversation with my family, and my family was like, my immediate family was like, "Are you sure? Is Power BI going to be a thing?" Like, and I said, well, that's a really good question, right? Will Power BI like fizzle out? Will Microsoft screw up the product? And then in 2 years, it's dead, right? Is it going to go by way of the dodo bird? Is it going to turn into business objects, right? Is it going to be, are you putting your eggs in a basket that's not going to be sustainable long term? So I really had to contemplate that. I really had to say, is this something that I really want to tie myself to? Because my success as a now business owner around Power BI really hinges on making sure Microsoft builds
the product
that's listening to the customers and building innovative things. If they're not doing that, I mean, thank goodness, man. Microsoft, thank you for making the licensing so complicated, because that gives me hours of time to talk with my customers about how to optimize pricing on things. Like, so, realizing like Microsoft wants to inherently make pricing easy to understand, but it's not. It's difficult. That's why I'm here. So, you have to make that decision. And Tommy, you made a similar decision, right? You had to say, I'm at where I'm at in my companies. I have to decide if I'm going to put all of my eggs into this Microsoft Power BI and Fabric basket, and do I trust them enough to keep this product moving forward such that I can build an entire career around what that's doing?
I mean, totally. And I mean, even the fear, like, is it going to go the way of Tableau eventually? Like, what's 20 years out? And I love that. Mike, we're getting awfully close to becoming an old married couple, because I have a question for you that I literally thought, how do I phrase this so one of his answers is not leave the company?
Oh,
and there was. So I have this question for you, and I'm literally like, but I got to phrase it because I know that's one of the answers. And listen, for what it's worth, it's a valid consideration for people to think about, especially sometimes. What did you tell me, Mike? You told me when I started my consulting.
I said you
outgrow the company. Or I finish other sentences.
You're doing things more advanced, and the company's allowing you to do them, and they're literally saying, don't do this one. Tie your hands. Do the and to your point, Tommy. Like, also sometimes companies don't make the commitment of, to your point as well earlier with what Jake is describing, right? Jake's doing more and more and more and more. So as he's adding more to his plate, what are they taking away from his plate to allow him to focus on these new things?
Right.
Hopefully, the management is understanding enough to say, we've added 3 or 4 new things all around Power BI and development of things. That is a higher priority than these other tasks you have. So either offloading those tasks to other individuals on the team, or hiring someone else to backfill some of those roles. And that's
1,000%.
It's an expensive proposition to backfill someone with these other roles you're not doing, but you have to really weigh that. I mean, that's a very strategic decision. A lot of companies don't take headcount lightly. And I mean, I do as well. Like, it's very important for me to bring on headcount in a very careful way, because what I don't want to do is I don't want to bring on a lot of people and have to let them all go because I
Right.
mismanaged or didn't have enough work to keep everyone busy.
So all that being said, the question I actually want to propose, and I'll start here. If you were to be brought into Jake's company, and the question, really your service that they want you to provide is, we want to improve the data culture. We don't want what happened to Jake to continue to occur in other departments. What's the strategy? What's the tactics? What's the project to get us to that point? To me, it's very clear. And this is something you did mention briefly, but I think this is the really good go-to, and it's the
Okay.
center of excellence.
Mm-hmm.
So if and this is something even Jake or people in this position I would be pushing. If I was in Jake's position, I'm talking to my boss
You,
repetitively
you,
on this idea of this idea of the center of excellence to
yes.
structure this up. So
Yeah. Oh, yes. And I mean, it's the center of excellence is the linchpin for all this. That's
mhm,
where data culture is developed. You
mhm,
mature it there. You work on it inside the center of excellence, and you also build into the center of excellence. You just do it. Honestly, like my customers ask me to
mhm.
build things for Power BI with them. We have no qualms about. We don't ask them, do you want a center of excellence? We just do it.
Sure.
I just show up. I say, where's your SharePoint page? Where can we put the documentation, the literature, the information around what you're
This is
doing?
great.
And
Yeah.
I just build the works. I build the SharePoint site or the Jira site or whatever. I build it as if I'm running the center of excellence. And what
That's
happens
what got
is
me to Chicago.
that's why you do this, because you know that is where culture begins, and as you develop and add more things to that area,
Mhm,
more of the company will start adopting it, more of the company will grow. And I can't tell you the number of people I work with in companies where they've done
mhm.
this. They just are given Power BI, they start out real small, and I say, look, you're getting to a point where you are going to have to hand this off to other people. Let's make sure you start building the center of excellence now. That way it grows with you. And then if you bring on more people, great. You have a framework to start them on. And the center of excellence shows you know what you're doing, because when people say, well, Tommy, what have you been doing with your models? Well, great that you asked. Here's the inventory of the reports that I've built. I've built some very lightweight documentation. Here's the terms and terminologies that we're using for Power BI. You want to go search for them, search from here. Here's a list of all reports. Here's the changes. Here's a semantic model. Here's diagrams and how to explain how to use it. If you put that stuff down, those are physical, tangible items
Yeah.
to show your company, one, you know what you're doing, and you're now onboarding, and you have to think like an educator
Yeah.
to some degree. I think you really have to
No.
have that training mindset on you if you're going to be part of the COE, because you're going to build stuff, but you have to think of it. How do I teach people that I'm building my stuff for how to use it?
So I'll go do you one better here, because this was the calling card where if people in Jake's position, rather than saying, "Oh, this is a shame, that's sad," this is an opportunity, because you can be proactive and create that SharePoint site. One of my biggest calling cards and my war cries at my first organization was, let's make Power BI act as if it's a department on its own, where it's established as an entity within the organization, because
Sure.
that was not the case. There were those
Yes.
random Power BI people doing things where, let's act as if business intelligence is its own entity within the department. We created an email, we had the SharePoint site, we started building that up as, trying to do what we could, where if you were on our marketing team or you're in sales, you had some great resources to learn about Power BI. And that's where it only existed, because that's where we were. But all of a sudden we're like, hey, we have this SharePoint site, we have this training. The next thing you know, the Power BI team, which there wasn't a team, was giving keynotes during the sales quarterly meetings.
Uh-huh.
And this became a thing where they knew and could recognize us as the Power BI people. The brand, honestly, it was kind of a brand thing, but do not underestimate what that can do, rather than you're doing Power BI on the side. So there's a great opportunity here, to your point, Mike, where you
Uh-huh.
don't have to wait for someone to come in. Yeah, this is going to be a lot of extra work for you on not when you're getting paid time. Personally, I would say do this after hours, because that's not, no one's expecting this. And but once you get this established, and it takes time, it being consistent communication. Hey, we're going to communicate with people when we create a new report, and we're going to do it this way. All of a sudden, people get used to a groove. They get used to a rhythm. We're hearing from the Power BI team. Oh, there's a new report. I want to learn how to use it. Okay. Well, that's Jake. That's Tommy. That's Mike. Okay.
Uh-huh.
Oh, look, Jake, Tommy, and Mike are doing a keynote on new things, where I can get my sales quota, or whatever the purchasing information. This becomes a common thread. It becomes a brand. It becomes an entity, and all of a sudden, the recognition is there, and that citizen becomes erased. So it's a great opportunity. And honestly, I don't think I can do much better than a closing on that. So for
I would
me,
agree. I'm going to close here as well. And I would also argue, I think a lot of this, there's a very similar pattern here. I've seen a lot of organizations when organizations embrace the center of excellence, that is a leadership decision. An executive sponsor is always important in all these situations, right? The executive, you're playing the balance between the value of Power BI and the cost of the employees to learn and or build in that solution or tool. So if you can find that sweet spot between we need 2 people, we need 3 people, if you're getting so much value out of the product itself, now you can justify a higher cost to then keep building in it because you're saving yourself time, the data is coming in correctly, and a lot of these are fluffy things you're trying to measure, like customer satisfaction. Do you send out surveys? How do people feel about your data? Like, if you're really improving the data culture quality by employing Power BI as a solution, how are you measuring that? Do you send out a survey? Simple things like that could really improve your messaging to leadership and say, we should continue investing in this. So at the end of the day, I'll say this. The Center of Excellence is very pivotal for what you're doing. I believe you're spending a lot of time, Jake, just building great stuff. You're making impacts. You've been gaining influence by your comment here, by getting access to the warehouse. People are trusting you. Take the trust, take that value equity that you've been doing, really start focusing on with your management and your leadership on emphasizing the importance of the Center of Excellence, emphasize the importance of measuring, add maybe a couple surveys in there of people who are using your content. What do you wish you would do better? How are you feeling about the data? Do you trust it? Like, start communicating those things, and then potentially you can send those same surveys out to other data products that the team produces, things coming from Salesforce, things coming from other products you have in your company, and see how those compare. Then you can take that back to leadership and say, look, we're doing something good here. Give me more time to keep building the Center of Excellence. If I had to put this is either my crystal ball or predicting what Jake would do. Jake, if you can do this and then add the ability for you to really push into the Center of Excellence, one of 2 things will happen. First thing, you will be the leader of the Center of Excellence. You will lead that helm. You will find other like-minded Power BI people across your company, and you'll invest in them, and you'll build great things for the company. That's the first option. It goes off and it starts thriving. Yeah. That only happens with buy-in by leadership.
1,000%.
The second thing is leadership doesn't understand. You get squelched, and this is as far as you're going to go. And either you decide that's the cap of what I want to be living with, and that's okay, and that's okay. It's a decision you can make. If that's where you want to be, sit there, and that you realize there's a ceiling. If you don't like that, then it's time to look for other opportunities and take the skills that you've learned and apply them to companies that does have the right leadership buy-in towards the data culture. They may not have the data culture yet, but the leadership is at least buying into the direction of that. And so maybe there's a third option. You can potentially wait it out until leadership rolls over, until a new leadership person comes in. Because someone always comes in with a new idea. Every time I've seen leadership show up at a different company, they're always like, well, this new tool that we used in our last company is great. We should just use it everywhere because they had success in the past. So they typically bring in their knowledge to what you're trying to do in your company. So maybe wait it out. Maybe if you're not finding that the data culture the COE is building, just hunker down, keep doing amazing things, rock it out. And then as leadership changes, maybe you move up into those roles, or maybe you become that executive leader that understands the value of data and the Center of Excellence.
Oh, Mike, to be 28 again and be in that position. Oh, this is bringing back. This was a good, passionate time.
This was
an angry young man trying to with something to prove.
When he was a lifetime ago, man. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Anyways, thank you very much for listening to the podcast today. I hope you found this conversation around Jake as a citizen developer resonating with you. Hopefully you are part of that citizen developer. Keep pushing into it. Keep adding value to your companies. I think that's really the end game here, is to keep pushing in, adding more value, delivering great valued products to your companies. With that being said, we really appreciate your ears. We know your time is valuable. Thank you so much for listening to us today. If you wouldn't mind, please share the podcast with somebody else, another citizen developer, if you don't mind, and let them know we've unpacked it and we've given you the roadmap for your career here. This is how you could move forward with your career if you'd like. With that being said, Tommy, where else can you find the podcast?
Hey, just like ChatGPT, please check your answers before you apply them. But you can find us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure to subscribe and leave a rating. It helps us out a ton. And as Mike said, please share with a friend since we do this for free. Do you have a question, idea, or a topic that you want us to talk about in a future episode? Head over to powerbi.tips. Head over to powerbi.tips/podcast. Leave your name and a great question. And finally, join us live every Tuesday and Thursday, 7:30 a.m. Central, and join the conversation of all powerbi.tips social media channels.
Thank you all so much. Appreciate your time. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time.